That can be life-saving. When you start ruminating about the past and or worrying about the future, neither one of which is now, you control your breath, you get into gratitude, you become present. And when you're present, if you even for a moment have a present moment awareness experience, then you're not worrying about the future or regretting the past. It can get better. Just keep trying. Whatever you're going through, whatever it is, it can get better. You can feel better. You can have more joy. You can have a fulfilling life. Just keep trying. Find something. You'll find something that will work.
Welcome to yourbrilliance.com. I'm your host, Amy Waterman. It probably won't surprise you to learn that women today are a lot more stressed than men. We're twice as likely to experience severe stress and anxiety. We're more likely to get depressed. And on top of all of that, we have a lot less downtime than men, thanks to all of the household chores and care work we do on top of our full-time jobs. So when difficulties hit us, they hit hard. We're often the ones looking after sick family members or arranging funerals and providing emotional support. But who's looking after us? That's why I wanted to talk to life and wellness coach, Michelle Collins. Michelle teaches people how to live in health and joy, no matter what challenges or experiences they've had. In her own recovery journey from loss, she's learned how a mindfulness-centered lifestyle can empower physical and mental well-being. She shares tools including yoga, meditation, Ayurveda, and positive psychology, which decrease anxiety, increase productivity, and help her clients, students, and audiences live happier, healthier lives. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you, Amy. Thanks for having me.
So you had your own struggle with loss. Is that what got you into this work?
Yeah, it really is. It really is. I've always been sort of a proponent of joy throughout my life, and I'm that friend that people come to when they're down, but I never considered it a vocation before. And once I struggled through a few different really challenging times in my life and came out of them in study, I would study my way out. I would learn, how can I lessen my pain? How can I regain joy in my life? And then I started having people come to me. It was organically at first. You know, I was the one who lost my mom. I was the one who went through divorce. So people would seek me out. You went through this. How'd you do it? How'd you survive it? And I realized how valuable my lessons were to people, and that with further study, I could really be of use, be helpful when people are going through difficult times. So,
well, it is interesting because we aren't taught how to survive loss and get through that stuff. It's just, soldier on, get through it, put it behind you, put it in the past. What are some of the most common ways people deal with loss just in everyday life?
Well, I think, there's such a variety of answers to that because there's such a variety of people and losses. But I think that we have our basic self-soothing techniques that are often not healthy or health focused. Things like medicating with alcohol or other types of medications, self-soothing through shopping, through travel, through anything. Denial is a really popular one. As my dad would say, denial is not just a river in Egypt. Every way that you can to stay away from the pain. And unfortunately, these self-soothing techniques are generally, eating, don't forget eating, generally not the best coping mechanisms for long-term health. People also turn to work, just throw themselves into their work. People do turn to exercise, but sometimes too extreme. So it's those types of things. Some people go to bed and sleep for.
Well, what's all those things have in common is the desire to get away from the pain, because the pain is so overwhelming. And we're not used to being inundated with that sort of pain. The little pains of life are fine, but that's just way too much. It shuts us down. And so I think it makes a lot of sense that we would want to shut ourselves down even further so that we don't have to feel. I want to go back to your experiences. So you've been through the loss of a parent, you've been through a divorce. How did you manage to not go into shutting down your pain and denial? And how did you figure out how to deal with it differently?
That's a great question. And obviously, I think about that a lot because how I did it is what people want to know. And the fact of it is, I did all of that. I did all of that. I turned to alcohol. I turned to self-soothing behaviors that were not supportive to my health. And I turned to denial. And I went to bed for months. And the thing is, long term, you're not going to live a joyful life if you are, overeating, over exercising, over shopping, connecting to self-soothing behaviors that aren't supportive to your health. So I recognized that because underneath it all, I'm a generally healthy, joyful person. My basic wiring is that way. And so as I got down the road of, for instance, drinking every day, I realized I was getting sick a lot. And being sick, I couldn't do my work, and I wasn't as adept at taking care of the house and the kids. And so, I had to look at that, and I had to realize that there was a better way where I could be my best self for the people who are counting on me without taking out my health and still coping. So the things that I put in place were more health oriented ways of coping. And I think that one of the keys, you do go into shutdown because our nervous systems are not incredibly resilient to begin with, because we're all under a low or medium level of stress just based on our society, just based on the lives we live. There's very little downtime. There's very little health focused practices. We're work, go, go, go. And so our nervous systems are already in this fight or flight type of response. So then when something happens something big happens, not just our daily stress, it can really, really knock us down.
Well, one of the things I think about is that when bad things have happened to me and it's felt like everything fell apart, my immediate instinct is to blame myself. Like, look at me, I'm such a failure. I couldn't make it work. I couldn't hold it together. And when I have those negative feelings about myself, on top of the stress and challenge of dealing with this painful experience, sometimes numbing yourself is actually the only way you feel like you can function. So how can we not only deal with the pain, but how can we also deal with those negative feelings about ourselves?
A great question, and it's a pair of questions, so I want to make sure I get both of them. The first of all, I think we do need to numb a little bit, because if you're not used to feeling, first of all, and then something big happens like a death or divorce, you can't feel all that, or you'll just lose it. And so I think this is why it's so important to have these resilience practices in place. But when you are in a grief situation, that's why it's great to have a therapist, some helpful friends who have been through it to give you advice. But definitely, the way that I describe it is when you're feeling okay, when you have some okay moments, you open the door just a little bit, you take a little peek into the room of doom, is what I call it, or the place where you hold the pain. And then you can slam the door if you want, or maybe it's okay. And then eventually, with just little bits at a time, with health practices on board, with maybe a really good therapist or a really good friend or both, you can slowly step through that door and start working through your grief in a healthy way so that it becomes integrated and you can grow through your pain, which I think is the ultimate goal, because you can't change the past. You can't stop what happened to you. And this is a good launching point for the second question, which was, I feel like a failure. I'm beating myself up. Well, one of the very first self-care practices I start working with clients about is a self-admonishment. That's just self-harm. You can't change the past. You can't change what you did. You can't change what happened to you. All you can do is change your relationship with it, pull the bad energy out of it, and change your reaction to it. So yeah, something terrible happened. If you put in place resilience practices and slow steps, including self-love, that is one of the absolute pillars of recovery, is to learn how to love yourself. I think that that's really the basis, one of the absolute core practices you can do if you want to live a joyful, healthy life. Quit beating up on yourself. Coulda, shoulda, woulda, just throw that out the door. That is never going to support your health.
And it is so true. It is a lack of self-love, because sometimes you can't, you feel so angry about what happened and you're so mad and you can't change it. So you have to find a safe target for all of that anger. And sometimes the safest target is just to turn it around and shoot yourself with it, because you can get mad about yourself. It's actually safe for you to get really angry about yourself, but you're worried about being angry about other people.
Well, you're always there, right? You're always there with yourself. So you're the easiest target, right?
So I want to talk about these resilience practices. So these are, if I understand it right, these are ways to keep you calm and grounded so that when bad things happen, you're a little bit more prepared to deal with it.
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, you get knocked down, you feel pain. You know, I'm not saying that these practices make it so you don't get unhappy, angry, hurt. But what happens is when these terrible things happen, you're able to process them and get up and move on a little bit quicker with a little bit more expansion. So it's not as devastating, and it may turn you 180 on your path, but you're able to right yourself in a quicker, more healthy way. So mind, body, spirit, all the practices, total connection of mind, body, spirit. I start with nutrition, because that you are what you eat situation is truer today than ever. But from an Ayurvedic perspective, it's you are what you digest. So I make sure that my clients learn about their basic constitution, which is called your dosha, and then prepare and eat foods that will nourish their bodies. So that's number one. And it's a slow process. There's no diet involved. There's no, black and white. Today, you're going to completely change your eating habits. The way that you do it is slow, incremental improvements in your diet and your digestion. And then there's movement. You got to get your body moving. We did not evolve our bodies to sit all day. And so this is making us sicker and sicker as our society gets more and more sedentary. So move. And it doesn't have to be any particular kind of movement. I'm a huge fan of yoga, but I also walk my dog twice a day, and I love to hike. So what I do when you're coaching, you work with your client's abilities and current situation. How can we fit in just a little bit more movement into your life? And then there's breathing practices, hugely important. Got to learn how to control your breath. If you learn how to control your breath, breathe to calm, that's key, big key. And then, other things like gratitude journaling, that can be life-saving. When you start ruminating about the past or worrying about the future, neither one of which is now, you control your breath, you get into gratitude, you become present. And when you're present, if you even for a moment have a present moment awareness experience, then you're not worrying about the future or regretting the past. You have a moment, a brief respite. And so I probably forgot some, but those are the basics.
That is so good. I really love what you said about being in the present moment, because I know that when life falls apart, all I think about is the past or the future. I'm either getting mad about what happened in the past, or I'm terrified about what's going to happen in the future. And I love this idea that you can actually get a brief break from it by implementing practices that help you be more in the present moment.
Yeah. And it's so important to do that because, like I was mentioning earlier, we're living in this high alert state, this high stress culture. And when we're in that high alert state all the time, it shuts down our rest and digest side of our nervous system. It's called the parasympathetic nervous system. And on a longer podcast, I might go into the details, but that's where we do our digesting and our healing. And when we're in stress all the time, we're not doing those things. So that's why the breath and the relaxing practices are so important.
So I want to take this a step further. So we've talked about some ways to deal with that immediacy of loss, but your website and your coaching is actually called Inhabit Joy. And I'm just thinking, so maybe we can cope with loss and we can keep on functioning and stay healthy, but how do we get from that to actually inhabiting joy?
Well, that's a great question. And I know that, for example, you're sitting next to your sick loved one's bedside. Joy is the absolute last thing on your mind. But if you can or you've just suffered a great loss, if you can take a moment, just a brief present moment awareness, it may not necessarily feel joyful. Our idea of joy, our culture's idea of joy is this like, oh my gosh, I'm running through a field with balloons and flowers, and that's great. And when those things happen, it's fantastic. But to inhabit joy really means to connect to that stillness and presence within you, that present moment awareness, because that gives you a break from everything. And I believe that we are truly innately joy, that we're born joyful. And then I kind of picture it like this beautiful, crystal sphere that just gets kind of, with our conditioning and our society and our, whatever our parents tell us no 100 times, it starts to get out of focus. It starts to get mud slung on it and that sort of thing. And so when we do our health practices, and especially meditation, mindfulness, present moment awareness, it clears that sphere off. So we become this joyful being that is our birthright. So that's how I feel like we inhabit joy. Joy is in us at all times. It's just covered, and we don't know how to connect to it because we've lost it.
I think that's so important, because sometimes when things are bad, it's really hard to believe they will ever be good again. And so if we can think about the fact that that sense of goodness and peace is actually in us, it's just clogged up with a lot of stuff, I think that is a way of feeling hope.
Yeah, and that's what I had to develop. I certainly didn't go into it's been about 12, 13 years of traumatic experiences with that in mind. But I had to learn that. And the reason I had to learn that is, like I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation here, that I go to study when I need an answer, and the answer I needed was, how do I stop feeling so terrible? I learned that, and it's a practice for sure, because I'm human. I'm always wanting, to go back to rumination. It's our nature, right? What's stressing me out right now? That's what we look for. We scan for danger. We evolved that way to save our lives. Generally, our lives are not in danger on a daily basis at this point, but our nervous system evolved to save us from life-threatening situations. And so that's why we feel so much stress. And that's why these practices are so important, to remind us we're not under threat on a daily basis. In our society, we're incredibly fortunate to live in this beautiful time. I'm guessing most of the people that are watching your show are not under siege, are not starving. There's certainly that out there in the world. We need to remember that when we're talking about this, but it's that we aren't really in threat of our lives on a moment to moment basis. And to connect to that memory is how to keep going, keep remembering that.
So you work with clients, you can work virtually with anyone in the world. Tell us a little bit about your coaching business.
Okay. Well, so I have a number of certifications and methods of study and methods of practice, that what I've done is I've kind of taken it and melded it all together. So meditation, mindfulness, wellness coaching, yoga therapy, And I'm also Reiki trained, attuned to mastery. And so I've learned a lot over the years from all these trainings. And so I can see a lot of different imbalances, say, in my clients. And I use all of the skills and training plus experience that I've had combined just to see, what's your first concern. If your first concern is I'm overweight, well, I have tools to help you with that. If your first concern is I'm anxious, so we balance the anxiety, and then we see, what's next. What let's go a little bit deeper and see how we can strengthen you so that you are really resilient and able to cope when stuff happens, because it will. And so so I coach. I have a couple of group coaching programs that I do. I don't have one running right now, but I'm going to start one back up after the new year, where people come. We meet once or twice a week on Zoom, depending on which one. And then there's weekly homework and practices, and get people meditating, get people into daily centering practice, mindfulness, that kind of thing, but fitting into your life. So I do the group way and also the one-to-one coaching. That's of course going to be more efficient because it's directed straight at you. What's your needs? What are your, and we basically just talk, and I assign homework and practices and journaling and all these types of things, increasing self-awareness and increasing physical, mental, and spiritual well-being.
Fantastic. And for those of you watching, if you want to check out Michelle's work, maybe work with her, we've got a link for you. Just go to yourbrilliance.org/joy. That's yourbrilliance.org/joy. Thank you so much, Michelle, for coming on to the show. And I wondered if you had any last message you would like to leave our viewers with.
I think the most important message is it can get better. Just keep trying. Whatever you're going through, whatever it is, it can get better. You can feel better. You can have more joy. You can have a fulfilling life. Just keep trying. Find something. You'll find something that will work.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And thank you out there for watching. We hope to see you again soon. Until then, let your brilliance shine.